Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon, and I'm the co-owner and managing director with Impetus Digital. And so for those of you who don't know what Impetus Digital is, our company has built and created some of the best in class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration tools. And we work with life science companies like pharmaceutical, medical device, biotech companies, for them to work with their physicians, payers, patients, allied healthcare providers, and everything from advisory boards to investigator meetings to co-author groups. And unfortunately, since COVID-19, we've also helped them with brand planning rollouts, big sales and MSL training sessions, etc. But what we really believe in is we believe at Impetus that everything starts with a thought. And with a thought comes a courageous conversation. We want to become the bridge for these conversations that go beyond the pill, that go into some of these more cutting edge, leading edge, hairy, audacious goals that are going to truly disrupt healthcare as we know it today. So we want to actually start, and this is the reason for this podcast and this YouTube channel, is to have the conversations with people like Lynda Brown-Ganzert that I'm so thrilled to have today in this conversation. Now, Lynda is actually a well-known and well-renowned leader in digital media, health technology, and innovation. She's been doing it for a long time in a myriad of different roles. She's known for her abilities to combine strategic thinking, leadership, business development, and doing a whole bunch of things around complex partnerships with emerging technologies and the market needs to deliver unique products and services to the people that she works with. She is currently working and is the founder and CEO of Curatio. This is actually a private social network for health, and it's used by some of the world's largest companies to support patients in over 80 different countries. She's produced over 100 different programs, products, and initiatives with her and her team, and her career expertise has always focused on using technology. So she's a techno geek just like I am, to help people connect. And that's what we do. We do that as humans. As we talk about collective consciousness and machines versus people, people need to connect. She's also the chair emerita at Simon Fraser University, and she's the director of the Canada Foundation for Innovation. So welcome, Lynda. So absolutely pleased to have another Canadian entrepreneur at the table today.
Thank you so much, and for that very kind introduction. It's a pleasure.
Love it. So happy. First, need to check in. How is family and health and happiness, especially during this crazy time with COVID-19?
You know what? Thanks so much for that personal check-in. It means a lot. I think like everyone, it's been a really strange time. We have school-age kids and running a business and, trying to keep everyone happy and healthy and also very, concerned and committed to my team and keeping them happy and healthy. So yeah, very, very challenging, but also has really brought to a point the need for this type of social connection and how it impacts our health. So, for Curatio, the pandemic really in a matter of days went from us being a nice to have solution and sort of best in class to a need to have. So it's been a very interesting time.
I love it, and I want to dig into that. But before we go into the story of Curatio, and people who are listening, we want to find out a little bit about Lynda. You've had a really interesting life journey and done a lot of cool things, and we're going to dig in there and have a discourse about it. But want to find out, you have a background in communications, and you've been the vice president of several really high caliber companies, everything from public relations with Edelman, and then you moved on to Nordicity, and then of course founded your own company at Curatio. Tell us how you started from where you did and ended up starting your own company.
For sure. So I think saying yes a lot to things along the way is part of the journey. But, I started my first business when I was 14, and I didn't know that I was an entrepreneur then. But it also coincided starting that first business, which was a dance school in a remote area of Canada. What also happened that year is I won the science fair for my project on how computers work. So it's interesting, right, to reflect back at, grade 8 and go, so that interest in technology and being an entrepreneur has been there from the beginning. Just took me a while longer to uncover that. But as you touched on, I mean, using technology to connect people is my passion. So I'm part connector and I'm part geek, and I find great satisfaction in the ways that you can use technology. That's what my graduate work was in. I've spoken around the world on that. But the power of technology to connect people is the theme that I have come back to now for decades.
Absolutely amazing. And so when you came to this place, I mean, Curatio is evolved, obviously, and it's, we're going to dig in there. But at the inception of the idea, what brought you there? What was the inspiration? What was the objective? What was the culmination or the serendipitous moments that caught the glimmer and ignited you starting this on your health journey?
Yeah, for sure. So like many entrepreneurs in digital health, it was very personal. So, the last 10 years, I've really been focused on private mobile networks and both, my work with Electronic Arts, and then into another game company that I founded, and then into another private social network company that I founded. So, the interest around private social networks in its very early days was something I was deeply immersed in. And then I found myself becoming a patient. Went through some really challenging times on the fertility front, a complicated pregnancy, high-risk pregnancy. And for the first time really in my adult life became a patient and went, oh my goodness, this sucks. It's lonely. I spent hours and hours looking for evidence-based research and trying to find other people that had my condition and were like me, and so that we could trade what we were using. So it was very personal in thinking, as entrepreneurs do, is like, here's a big hairy problem. How would I solve it? And then thinking, well, wait a minute. I think I know one way to solve this, and it's a part of the overall healthcare transformation puzzle, but it's an important part, and that's where Curatio came from.
I love it. Yeah. So what's interesting about Curatio? So if I was just coming out, out of nowhere and sat down in front of Lynda, how would you actually describe what Curatio does? I know that the concept behind it is, quote unquote, a social health prescription. But how would you describe to a complete stranger, somebody who's never heard of your company before, about what it is that you do? What's your elevator pitch?
Sure. So when we talk about a social health prescription, our mission is no patient alone, and to have everyone in the world have this type of social health prescription. And pretty much everyone can relate to this, and I'm sure people on the call will resonate. Whether it's you or a family member or loved one, you have that health crisis, you get that diagnosis, and in a matter of seconds, your entire life changes. So you're not an expert in the area. You're not sure what to do next. You're not sure who to talk to. You're scared. You want information, and you're likely feeling, pretty alone. The challenge is you're not going to necessarily post that on your Facebook. You're not going to share it on your LinkedIn. And so people go underground and have a really hard time making those connections. So the easiest way to think about Curatio is think of it as a matchmaker. So when you get that diagnosis, along with your follow-up appointments and your prescription and what your care plan is, imagine if you also got that buddy system. And a buddy system that would not only connect you privately in a way with others that not only matched your condition, but your lifestyle, your interests, your hobbies, your age, but also did some of that really hard lifting around finding evidence-based information, programs that are relevant to you, trackers that help make the day-to-day easier, and supporting you sort of each step of the way and meeting you wherever you are in that journey. So you can kind of think of it like if, a really intelligent Tinder for health met private Facebook and had the, nice personalization recommendation of Netflix, all designed specifically for you as a patient.
So well, nicely said, because that was going to be my next question, is the competitive differentiation versus what's already out there. So I think that was very eloquently described. So it's really kind of a matchmaker. It allows for socializing in a healthcare capacity, especially in areas that might be, a bit stigmatized, especially things, since COVID-19, PTSD, mental health, addiction. These are really pivotal areas. So would you suggest that, for example, if I was somebody that, let's just say theoretically, I had a food addiction, would I be able to go into Curatio, type in certain comments, and then suddenly there would be a community of people that I would be able to have access to?
Yeah. For the conditions that we support, absolutely. And the way that we build Curatio communities is with our partners, with our customers. So whether it's a nonprofit group, a research organization, pharmaceutical manufacturer, PSP, a hospital provider, what we're doing is working with them and their evidence-based content and leadership, so that we can match within that particular thematic area. And that does a lot of things, like, to your point, often when you come into these, let's say, open social forums, your privacy is not guaranteed. The security isn't there. Depending on which country you're in, you're sharing a lot of data that you may not want to be shared. And so what we do is give a platform that is privacy and regulatory compliant, that allows our customers to connect directly with their patient populations and be the broker of building those relationships rather than getting in the way.
So how would that happen? So I'm thinking out loud about a platform like Patients Like Me, or other similar ones where there's a whole series of barriers to entry and you need to be a patient, and you cannot, like you said, as a pharmaceutical company, biotech, a patient support program or a patient support organization, you can't necessarily, like you said, be a broker or develop those relationships directly because there's a bit of a firewall.
Right.
How do you get around that, especially if there is questions around trustability, credibility, privacy, concerns that a insurance company might not be the ones coming in and lurking behind the anonymity of being in a virtual space and suddenly saying, aha, so-and-so has such and such condition, let's start doing some surveillance. How do you kind of go around that, especially when other platforms like Patients Like Me or other ones don't necessarily allow what you're doing?
Yeah, excellent question, and a very deeply informed question. So thank you for that. So let me break it into a couple of parts. So let's talk about data and privacy, where the user owns their data, and we are the steward of the aggregate and de-identified. So that in itself is a real game changer and really empowers patients around participating in that data and research exchange. The second part of that is that you need to have an identity in Curatio. So you don't have to use your real identity, but in terms of participating, you need to have an identity and be a person and be involved with it. And that changes some of the dynamics because you're more sensitive, I guess, about what your reputation. You're not going to come in and just blast a inappropriate program, let's say, or question. The third aspect is that we've got both open and closed communities. And so open communities are open to anyone as they are. And typically those have world-leading experts and organizations that are behind supporting those open communities. And the other part of what we offer is closed communities. And so those are for patients that are on a therapy, and they onboard just as they onboard into their patient support program. We're right there from the beginning, and we can bring in their nurse, we can bring in the drug advisory navigator. We can be with them right from the start. But because it's a closed environment, it enables health organizations that haven't been able to form those relationships, so like pharmaceutical manufacturers, to build relationships directly within those private communities as a type of companion to the therapy. So the flexibility of having both open and closed means that we can support full spectrum, whether it is somebody that's already aligned with a therapy or a provider or a care plan, or someone that's in an open community and just coming into it as their own patient.
So let's just say, for example, I'm pharma company X, and I want to get feedback on some new patient education materials that I'm developing. Is this the right wording? Is this specific enough? Is this too difficult to understand? Would I approach Curatio and say, hey, I'd like to create a closed community with XYZ type of patient. These are the criteria. Does Curatio then intercede in a professional services model where you find and collect these people? Hey, we've got this kind of closed program. Would you like to participate? Almost like market research or something like that. And do you do that on behalf of the pharma company? Or do you just open it up and say, pharma company, you can join Curatio. You need to kind of navigate and figure this out yourself and find those people and create your own closed community. Is it a self-serve, or is it a professional services-based service that you provide?
Yeah, so it's what we call a hybrid SaaS. So it's software as a service with those professional services, which absolutely can support patient acquisition, communications, research, real world evidence, data insights, reporting, and we can see that end to end. So it's regulatory compliant. We have an adverse events, pharmacovigilance modules in. We've also helped our customers through advertising boards and all of that. So in a closed environment, we can onboard and support each of those steps along the way, and that's within a closed environment. In many instances, we'll also have an open group of patients that we can also engage, and we have customers that are running both open and closed for being support to a general population in a condition area through the open, and then closed for patients that are specifically on their therapy.
Sometimes we actually hear, because as you probably heard, Impetus does a lot of these closed communities, but through our platform called advisory boards and focus groups, etc. One of the things that oftentimes comes up as an issue at the pharma level from a compliance standpoint is their individual companies having a concern of the marketer or the medical affairs or the scientific affairs individuals having actual information about patients with a condition and or who are on their drugs. So direct information, they're called private information. Is that something that you've run into specifically in those circumstances with companies that might have an over issuance of guidance and compliance? Do you intercede on their behalf to create those closed communities and collect things in aggregate and give it to them with, anonymous results?
Yes, yeah, we can absolutely help with that. So, what we're at the end of the day, what we're helping our customers do is better understand their patient populations and what they need. And we're helping the patients develop a relationship and get better support, from the customers that we work with. So having the regulatory and privacy compliance in place is really important. Every MSA we go through, we're going through privacy, legal, security, compliance. All of our team is pharmacovigilance trained. But at the end of the day, it's the going back to the user, the patient owning their data, right? And having the aggregate and de-identified insights, those contextual insights that are most often missing for all of our customers, and most often missing in health too.
And how can patients and patient organizations leverage Curatio for things like PCPA, which is, regulatory or market access dossier submissions? Do they leverage that for patient groups to work on those kinds of dossiers for market access to particular drugs, or for requests to CADIF and other sorts of regulatory or market access associations? Do they work through Curatio to determine patients to help work on those sorts of reports?
They absolutely can, and that's the beauty of the open communities, as well as, I'm sure you found there's many patients that really want to be involved and, want to make things better for the next person and want to share that expertise and are hugely knowledgeable in the conditions. So being able to make those introductions and invite people and formulate those conversations to help input that is something we absolutely help with.
And so I guess the only other kind of key area is really around clinical studies and clinical trials. I would love to get your view on pre-COVID and post-COVID. And we've seen that there's just been this whirlwind of change. A lot of clinical trials just stopped abruptly, and I think there was a lot of frustration on everybody's part. I think even the way data, like you were referring to, real world evidence and real world data evolved very quickly and potentially clinical studies and the protocols and the amendments had to be resurfaced and rethought, some even having to go back to the IRBs and to review committees, and even the types of data and the clinical endpoints may have had to change. For example, where somebody might have had to go in and get a blood test, maybe they've actually had to revert a study to using a wearable tracker to now start collecting information and data for the study. Tell us a little bit about where that has evolved and what you've seen through Curatio.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're doing a lot of work right now on the integration of very specific wearables and working with our partner Cloud DX and real-time patient monitoring, and all of that is towards those points of how do we pivot as a healthcare industry and do this, make this transformation in a way that the last thing we want right now is for clinical trials to slow down. That's we don't want to lose any of the ground there. And so, what we provide is not only that privacy, regulatory, and compliant platform with the real-time monitoring and device, but also what I think is really interesting is this longitudinal research, right? That we so often forget, and some of the policy changes right now around needing to track a patient for the rest of their lives. So there's that need there, but then there's also thinking about, well, what's in that for the patient, right? And so helping to form, that community, that tribe, and those social connections that'll see the long-lasting impact of, tracking that real-world evidence. So I mean, it probably sounds strange to say that I'm excited about that, but I am, because I see it as a bridging the gap between patients and trials, and really leveraging technology for what it's best used for. And ideally, solving some of the challenges around recruitment, because one of the things technology can do is scale. And, another thing it can do using AI and ML is personalize. And so then that starts to broaden, the range of clinical trial recruitment and involving people and getting more diversity in those trials as well.
I love it. You brought up something that was really interesting around housing or encapsulating the patient with a community of support. So not only potential quote unquote strangers within a social platform, which can suddenly become a community of support and friends, etc., but also people that you deal with in real life, like you said, like a nurse navigator or another allied healthcare provider or your physician. How has Curatio, or how is Curatio looking to navigating this interoperability concern, issue, or opportunity to allow this your platform to be almost like a portal at which information can be transferred back and forth?
Yeah, exactly. You nailed it. And so, from the beginning, we always thought of Curatio as not being another walled garden, right? We wanted that interoperability, and we wanted to be able to integrate and engage with the other aspects of patient care along the journey. And so to that end, I mean, we've really fast-tracked, virtual visits. So, again, working with Cloud DX on their real-time advanced patient monitoring, which is just best in class and absolutely incredible company and solution. On Call, which gives us virtual visits and, the telehealth aspect of it. Looking very specifically at wearables that are attributed to the condition. So not just general wearables on steps, but actually very specific to, if you're a COPD patient, what best in class is. And then on the back end is making sure that we've got, that API and that interoperability and that mindset of collaboration, where it's all of these pieces that come together that are going to make for a patient experience, because then we can use our matchmaking to say, okay, so if you're newly diagnosed and you're also a cyclist and you're a woman who also runs a poker group, here's your path. Here's where we can connect you to the people, to the programs, your tracking, to your care team. And here's how we can also support your family as you're going through this. So it becomes quite powerful. One of the things we're working on right now through a supercluster project is that integration of the real-time advanced patient monitoring, and also a type of program marketplace where we're taking these amazing evidence-based programs that are typically developed and run in academe, but then never see the light of day. And so we're bringing these wonderful evidence-based programs into a program marketplace which then again, patients can pick and choose and be matched to what's most appropriate for them.
I absolutely love that. That is just absolutely brilliant. I do want to ask you a question around patient authenticity. There's so many honest, loving, great patients out there who need Curatio, who need the support and that community of people around them to get them to the next level and to get them into a place of healing and past their condition. But there's always there's always sort of a bad seed or an element that needs to get weeded out. How does one manage that in the Curatio portal around inauthenticity, or somebody who's not being for real or participating in some of these closed, quote unquote, paid pharmaceutical platforms or programs who don't really have that condition? Is there any tools that you're using for meeting those expectations?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that question, because in our early days, and let me just back up, every single condition, every single deployment we work with, we always start with a patient, and we bring in patient advisory group, we interview, we talk, we walk with patients on that journey. And one thing we heard really clearly early on was that by and large, people were not having those authentic and resonating connections in their support group. So, Tuesday at 7, they would drive across town and they would go maybe once or twice and say, you know what, like I had nothing in common with that group. I didn't connect to anyone. It's totally not for me. I'm never going again. And we heard that over and over. And this was before we even got into the really hard building of it. And so we listened to that and we thought, okay, so then it's really important that we do two things, that we match people not just based on condition, because that does not define you. It just happens to be something else that you have in your journey. So not just matching on condition, and using machine learning to understand the whole person and what would be the best fit. And then giving them, in addition to the community, giving them their own private circle. And they get to choose who's in that private circle. And that's where the identity comes in. So if you're choosing, you're adding people to your own private circle, which is unique and totally specialized for you, then the person it's like forming a dinner party, right? The people that you invite need to have an identity. Now they might be calling themselves something different, but you have an authentic and developed relationship with them. And if you don't want them in your circle, then you remove them. So those were two things we've felt very strongly about in hearing back from patients about what wasn't working in a traditional sort of face-to-face model.
That's very, very cool. And I think in a lot of ways, what you just described is a peer influence for maintaining and managing authenticity, right? Because people will figure you out very quickly. And I think like other programs that use social crediting, and you were saying as well too, social influence and voting, upvote and down votes, like the Sermos of the world, helps to build that credibility for the individual person's personalities, avatars, whatever you want to call the archetypes that people are using to describe themselves. So very interesting way and model for future online platforms as well. So there's a lot of bits and pieces to Curatio. You talked a lot about artificial intelligence. You talked about matchmaking. Can you describe it all on how, without obviously the proprietary details, of how this AI works? So when somebody comes in, first of all, my first question is, how do patients find you? And secondly, when they come in, how does the AI kind of work its magic in the background so that it knows to do the right type of matchmaking?
For sure. So how patients find us is if it's prescribed and we're onboarding as a part of their patient support program, or it's a provider prescribing it, or it's a nonprofit organization that is inviting people in, and then we deep link them directly to their community. We also will grow and acquire communities as well. So in that open model where we know someone is looking for that support or information and can invite them in. So it's really easy to join Curatio. It's a simple a download and a link, and away you go. In terms of what happens next, the first person you meet is the AI buddy, and this buddy is with you the entire way. So she or he helps onboard you, helps navigate, answers questions, introduces you to your human community manager, because we have a mixed modal human computer model, and is your 24/7 sort of support person. That's how we're using AI, as again, we took a really patient centric perspective. And what's interesting, what I'll share there, is that we also realize that patients as people have different learning styles, are introverted, extroverted, have different psychometrics. And so not everyone is going to feel comfortable immediately matching or creating their own circle or joining a group or joining a program. And so, the buddy was developed in part around that everyone has that first friend and can ease into, the social part of it if they want, or can go full bore if they would prefer. But that was an important consideration of the buddy, is really thinking again back to the patient. What does the patient need? And hearing, I want to kind of get used to this. I want to maybe take part in a program or some research before I start building my social connection. And others that would say, no, you know what, like, sign me up. I want to meet a mentor. I want to join this program. So just adjusting for human nature.
All right, fantastic. You've also mentioned in the Curatio platform that there's things like gesture-based trackers. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is exactly?
Yeah, for sure. So those are just really easy visual ways for people to share and record and track how they're feeling, both qualitative and quantitatively. So gesture-based, meaning you can, use your finger to go up or down, or a slider, just really engaging visual ways for people to describe and track how they're doing. And that can be anything from, a pulse or glucose through to mood, stress. It's just a really fun and engaging way to help people track their day-to-day. And what we find interesting is you can choose to share those, and as people form those social connections in that long-lasting tribe in the platform, very simple things like it's to be able to post an image that shows you're having kind of a down day versus having to explain it or having to write it out. And, if you can't get off the couch, you probably don't even have the energy, right, to write out, I'm having a really hard day because of. But what we see is when they post that, and when we share that visual within their trusted group, their tribe immediately comes back around them, says, you know what, it looks like you're having a hard day. Can I do anything to help? Or, send a word of support or a funny picture. And that in itself has a really important impact on psychosocial and well-being outcomes.
That's fantastic and very, very interesting. On that note, when you talk about seamless interfaces where sensors on, everything from keyboards to just lifting your hand and having that data collected in a central repository to read a person's behavior or thoughts or emotions, is things like facial recognition or software in that space something that you're looking into? I know there's a lot of controversy about that. Certainly there's a lot of potential benefits, everything from temperature checking, other sorts of things, mood evaluation. Is there other types of software that Curatio is considering integrating in this sort of gesture-based tracking systems?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. We think about it more in terms of accessibility. So as we broaden the conditions we support, how can we best engage someone who maybe has limited visibility or needs voice access or is recovering from a stroke? And so we think about the ways that we can use technology to increase accessibility. There's I think also a great interest in mood and overall sort of well-being as it relates to a condition. And it's pretty early days of research, and there's a couple in Canada too, that are working on wearables that are related to mood detection, but it's still pretty early days. But I'd say that's another area that we're really interested in.
Yeah, and there's just tons and tons of legs behind it. As soon as you get into the patient-centricity space, there's a lot going on, including the fact that you've also enabled the platform with medication tracking. Adherence is a huge issue for the world, pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, employers, governments, because this all comes down to quality of life, it comes down to health outcomes, and it all ultimately comes down to costs. So I was just curious around medication tracking, but while we're on the topic of tracking, what about COVID-19 contact tracking? Is anybody approached Curatio about this? So can you speak a little bit around the whole tracking system as it relates to COVID-19 and also medication adherence in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So to back up on that one, there's been literally decades of research that show when you have that peer accountability, that social support, you have better adherence. It's like your running buddy showing up at the door. So you might not go for a run if you're feeling really bad, but for sure you're going to have a conversation. You might even go for a walk, right? So that social accountability tied to adherence, we know works. The problem's been you haven't had a way to scale that and to deliver that at scale in a way that's private and personalized. So that's really where we come at from the tracking is what is the social accountability and the ease that we can build in that helps the patient, helps the family caregiver for that matter, do the tasks that they need to do every day in a way that embeds social across all of that. So that's the medication adherence tracking, monitoring. We're doing some really interesting stuff on predictive analytics. So helping patients understand what might trigger a certain aspect of their health, or what leads to a better day, what leads to a worse day, and really empowering them with some of those insights. And predictive analytics is another big area. Now, as it relates to COVID, we launched what we're calling Stronger Together, which is a COVID-specific community. And just as a note there too, we also during COVID provided that as a platform for free to nonprofit organizations that need to keep their patients connected. So there is some really interesting opportunity there for not only contact tracing, but support of people that have survived COVID, and what we can learn about that, what they can share and get support from together, and how that's going to inform research going forward. So it's an important area, and the Stronger Together initiative is related to that, not only supporting outpatients and people that are going through COVID or survive COVID, but also that longer term breadth of knowledge around what COVID-19's impact has been on patient population.
And how has your Curatio platform helped or hindered around the dreaded adverse event monitoring? As you know, this is sort of the bane of every pharmaceutical company's existence. There's a whole protocol that's required about any semblance or taste of an adverse event. How do you sort of help to solve that issue within your platform?
Yeah, so we help a whole bunch with that and make it a lot easier, a lot less painful for everybody involved. So we've built a whole adverse event pharmacovigilance module, and that has been highly informed by our customers. So it maps exactly the process that they need to go through, and automates a big aspect of that. So it makes that AE part just a heck of a lot easier, and again uses technology in a way it's designed to, which is to automate and scale and grow efficiencies there.
That's a perfect solution. I also really like the fact that you're saying that people will, generate adherence and things because there's peer influence. Gretchen Rubin wrote a great book called The Four Tendencies, and one of the largest parts of our population are the obligers. And those are people who need accountability partners, which is very much what Curatio does. Yeah. It also actually really speaks to the James Clear book, Atomic Habits, which is every single day, a 1% action in the direction, voting with your feet, of doing these small little incremental things to do those things right in a positive direction. So I think Curatio is a great social prescription, as you have suggested. Now, with that comes the need for the dopamine drip. We go onto our social media. We love that little red dot on the top of our social media post because it creates that motivation. Dopamine creates motivation, and the little dopamine drip that keeps us going, to keep us logging into Curatio, to keep speaking to our friends, to see who actually said something to me today. That's why we go into Facebook. So you have actually incorporated something called karma points. So tell us a little bit about how you are leveraging that in a really positive way of being the dopamine drip for Curatio.
Yeah, for sure. So karma points are designed to be reciprocal. So it's not just about you, it's about how you support others. And that's a really different way to look at it. And there's so definitely some gamification, but I would say on that dopamine drip, we look at it in a really different way. And we're trying to shift the paradigm here on digital health and what matters. And that, to that point, is whether someone's visiting, with us in their community every day, 10 times a day, once a month. What we want to be able to do is to be of service and to help a person through a blocker. So if we have someone who comes into Curatio, they're having a hard day, they're having a hard time with adherence, they need support with this, maybe they need to do an injection, they have a needle phobia and they need some backup on that. If we can meet them where they are and help them overcome that barrier, whatever it is for them, which leads to an improved outcome, which leads to adherence, which leads to quality of life, then that's what we want to measure. That's what's important to us, is have we helped someone where they were blocked, and help them overcome and proceed.
So absolutely special and important. So amazing. I wanted to also ask you, we talked about Curatio being the social prescription, right, in this new healthcare model. We have seen an acceleration of changes at Health Canada, the FDA, the NIH, and health organizations across the world, accelerating the acceptance of things like software as a medical device, digital therapeutics, and many, many other things that are just, COVID has been a change accelerant. So as we talk about things like Curatio being a type of prescription, it's a health platform. Talk to us a little bit about where you see that working. Is there going to be a digital pharmacy that allied healthcare providers, patient organizations, and healthcare providers are going to go into their phone onto a little digital pharmacy and then click, and then it goes into the portal and this patient gets a link into this new prescription? So what does this new digital prescription look like in the future?
Mm-hmm. Well, my vision of the future is that this goes way beyond disease management, all through to prevention, so that we start there. We start with looking at what makes for healthy communities and healthy families. And if we start there, and if we look at the importance of social, and the importance of creating a type of a wisdom of a shared knowledge and shared data within communities, and think of the power of communities and micro communities around things like rare disease or COVID survivors, where just being able to connect and share information is going to fast track research. So, in our vision, we go all the way to, let's go way before people are even sick, and look at prevention and awareness and healthy living, and then let's be there for them and make it easy. To your point, make that interoperability seamless, not add that as another job to the patient and family, so that when they are struggling with a health challenge, that they're supported and that they can be empowered, and that they're also taking on their own health, right? That they're empowered to advocate and to build the relationships with their care team as they move towards that optimal health. So that, may sound idealistic, but I think we're closer than we think. I think the silver lining in COVID is that digital health has been ready and willing and just so eager to make some of these changes, and we're seeing what's taken us sometimes 2 years in the past to get approved in 2 weeks, and I know my colleagues in other digital health companies are finding the same. So we've been ready and willing, and here we are, and it's just in this time of darkness, it's very satisfying to be able to be helping and be providing some of the solutions to get us through.
I find it fascinating as well too about Curatio potentially being a platform that itself could be involved in a clinical trial, just like software as a medical device. Is that something Curatio is considering, of looking at patients without a social prescription platform community and how they manage and navigate and what their health outcomes are, versus those people involved in Curatio? Is that a clinical study that you would consider?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I think it goes like to just think of how you could fast track research and the added value of that real world evidence and some of the predictive analytics that I talked about as well. So when you start to see all of that, you know, not only can we support and participate and help on the trial, but can we actually get those happening, you know, faster, shorter, more effectively, and do that longitudinal tracking that's so valuable to the patient and to everyone involved.
Patients are so important. We talk a lot. We've been talking in the pharma world about patient centricity for the last decade. I think that it's only recently that it's really come basically, you know, pedal to the metal. It's become real. Okay. So I'm just curious about in the world of blockchain and medi-ledgers and all kinds of other things in that regard of patients potentially owning their data, being able to democratize patient health data, being able to monetize it and use it as a type of universal basic income as these information gets streamed into data lakes and researchers and clinicians and pharmaceutical companies tapping in, and the patient who's just sensorially providing this data just, you know, through just by living provides this information and gets paid. Is that a possible vision?
Yes, absolutely. You know, absolutely. And, you know, we are all in this together. And it's been very fragmented. And I think one of the roles that we can play in the background and be the engine behind is making those connections where it's not adversarial. It's not, you know, one party contributing data to the benefit of the other. It's like it's coming together and saying, okay, how can we put as much information and knowledge and tracking and data behind this to solve it, to find a cure, to make it better, and that's empowering for everyone, right? Like there's no one in that value chain that doesn't benefit from that type of coming together, and we're excited to be quietly in the background powering that those conversations.
I'm super excited about it. I would be remiss to end this interview without asking you the question that we're probably all curious about. Many of us have probably have seen you on the popular TV series called Dragon's Den a few years ago, and that you were backed by two of the dragons. Do you want to share quickly on what that experience was like and what you learned from being on Dragon's Den?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been such a wonderful relationship for us. So we actually had 3 folks involved in Dragon's Den come in, and they've been amazing. And it's been a very, very helpful process to us. You know, personally, it was nerve-wracking. Certainly not on my bucket list, but after you've done that, every other pitch seems a lot easier. So I'm glad that we did it. You know, the hardest thing is everything, it's done live to tape. So there's no editing. Whatever you say is fair game. And you're sitting there holding your team and all of the work that they've put into it. You're holding your family, the sacrifices that they've made. You're holding your investors and their belief in you. You're holding the patients and the families that have been, you know, with you right from the beginning. It was just crushing to be holding all of that and trying to do as best as you can to represent all of it, because I'm only one person in Curatio. It's not about me. It's about the team and the patients and our customers that have been with us. So yeah, it was a great experience. I don't want to do it again, but I'm so glad that we have the opportunity.
Congratulations to you, and that was absolutely outstanding. And I do need to ask you as well, you do also have a podcast show. Can you tell us a little bit about what the purpose of that is and what kinds of really cool things you've done and guests you've had on your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've just kicked that off during COVID because we're like, okay, so how do we bring this thought leadership and expertise on Curatio Connects is the podcast. And so we have all sorts of really wonderful experts. We tackled a lot around mental health in the early episodes, just as we were all coming to terms with this pandemic. But we'll continue to bring on different experts in the area. And many of those experts are in the platform as well. and taking appointments and doing Q&A.
That's awesome. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. As I was alluding to earlier, a big fan of other entrepreneurs in Canada. Love what you've done. Curatio is doing some outstanding things, and I can't wait to see the continued success. And for those of you who are listening in, please, we will be leaving in the show notes links so that you can contact Lynda or her company Curatio. If you want to check out her podcast, we'll also be leaving a link for that. I do encourage you to get in and dig in. There's some really great things there. And for those of you who want to actually continue some of these courageous conversations, these are the kinds of things that Impetus does with our Insight platform through our asynchronous and our synchronous tools. Being able to have dialogues beyond the pill, talking about things that are truly going to positively disrupt healthcare, change the way we think about patients, and do medicine in the future. So please look for that. We're so pleased, Lynda, to have you and the wonderful things that you and your team at Curatio are doing. And thank you to all of our audience who've attended and for those who are listening as well. Thank you to all and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you.